Good evening, all my friends in YouTube land, and in this case in Zoomville. Uh, make a few adjustments here. So this evening's Dharma talk, uh, consciousness first, and it's just a way of as a reference point for me to encourage you to be aware of that aspect of your mind that seems to be an open dimension where thoughts arise. It seems to be, call it awareness. Call it consciousness. The focus part seems to be awareness. The default part seems to be consciousness, and it divides itself up in all kinds of ways that are meant to be helpful to our well-being, to our desires and hopes to get that, keep away that over there, but we want more of this over here, and we want to disregard anything that's taking up too much of our time when we're on the way to the ice cream store. So again, for the 15,000th time, always about awareness. Success and failure are those are in the past. If you're interested in success and failure, go find another teacher. I didn't succeed in anything. And even that's not a credential. But the whole success and failure idea is about anything has some kind of an outcome, some kind of a fruition, some kind of a, we work really hard and we become really good at playing the guitar, to be very literal about it. But you can also work very hard and find out fundamentally who you are and what this is, because sometimes referred to as a duality. To see that there are no separate things. Every time I say this, I feel like some kind of a counter in the background is going 5,682, 5,683. But I want to say it over and over again because it's so important. It's so important that when you sit down whole still, watch what moves, because what moves is not as near as important as the space in which it occurs, but you won't understand the space in which it occurs in a non-ontological way until you watch the ontos. In other words, the thing quality of objects, ideas, conclusions, analyses, and so on, outcomes. It seems to be necessary to watch the things come and go. Do a lot of it. And insofar as you can, refrain from making it any worse. So don't add. Do no math at all, at least while you're doing the sitting practice of meditation. When you get up off the cushion and you're in what we call post-meditation, then just be aware of whatever's moving or not, or do it as a practice or don't do it. I would leave that up to you. And the reason I say leave it up to you is the causes and conditions that are arising in each person's individual post-meditation or life or at their job or their business or working with their dog or the next door neighbor. Less protocol is better there, so that which is showing up can be seen more clearly without one trying to lay some kind of a trip on everything, so that you get the credential of being more aware. A lot of people are wandering around after meditating and making assumptions about how much more aware they are. It's maybe, but it's a little clumsy, that kind of credential. So at some point I'll begin to slow down or stop talking and ask for questions. And questions are very helpful for all of us to help draw out what I might not be able to produce on the spot in terms of some kind of something that would be helpful. So consciousness first, the very you could say it this way, and sometimes it's done this way, and this may work for you or not, just to be aware of being aware, just notice, just a first shot of it. Just notice that you actually are, that whatever identity you are concluding that you are, or that you aren't, or whatever position you're taking on that me complex we call the ego, that there's an awareness that doesn't belong to anyone. The ego doesn't invent that. The ego didn't come along and, well, I think I need to get a hold of some awareness somewhere. Wonder where they're selling that at, or wonder who I can deal with to get more awareness. But those kinds of things can even come up in the Buddhist tradition. Buddhist tradition is open in such a way that it's a cumulative tradition rather than revealed. The revealed is somebody up there connects with somebody down here, and they become the messenger of Gizmo or whoever he is. I don't mean to mock anybody's spiritual path. People should do whatever they need to do, and I would support them in doing that, insofar as I'm able. So the revealed kind is that kind of an imaginary authority that someone is able to usurp and manipulate people, control them. Maybe their intention was good, maybe not. Maybe their intention was good, but their insight into the fundamental nature of their own mind and the fundamental nature of the society they were in, there was misunderstandings that caused them to feel like they should control people instead of liberate them. They might even say, well, I'll control them for a little while, and then eventually they'll connect with God, or they'll, through me, through my wonderful presence, and so on. Again, not trying to mock anybody, but there's a lot of baloney back there. If you ever looked into it at all, and a lot of great teachers and teachings. So I say, if I function as your teacher, listen to what I'm saying. Train your mind. Sit down and notice how untrained you are, and do a lot of it until you don't see anything else, until you see what this fundamentally is. I have to keep knocking out the emails that are coming in. They cover up Michael's forehead. So the next time you sit down, hold still and look at the wall, just be aware. Use the concept of consciousness and go into that and notice that you're actually aware. You're the awareness that you're actually aware of sitting there. You're aware of the wall. You're aware of your body form, and you're possibly some part of your body may be a little uncomfortable. Maybe you're aware that you're dozing a little bit, but it's the awareness that is important, not the form that arises in it, though you cannot understand or see into the nature of the awareness unless you look at the forms that are moving without adding, subtracting, or dividing, because that causes one to go back down into and reaffirm a self and an other, which, of course, the extreme of that is warfare, and the other extreme of it is grasping or love, the relative kind. If you have questions, I'm ready. If not, I can keep talking. Go ahead.
When you're bowing,
Yes.
You say consciousness first. Is there a second?
Nope. No. I mean, there's things will come into your mind stream, and then you just can return to just consciousness only. But there has to be some kind of a practice dynamic there, because you can't actually locate it, because it doesn't have any status as a thing. Consciousness is the space in which the apparent things show up, in which we grasp at some, reject others, and shut down on others. And this causes the grasper, the rejecter, and the ignoring aspect of the consciousness that is referred to as the seventh consciousness. We're just trying to find a way to talk about it that is helpful to any one of us to train our mind to see fundamentally what is true and how to fundamentally help others without interfering with them more.
Yes. So in our practice setting, if we're sitting on the cushion, beginning our practice, and a minute ago you said, notice the wall, notice if you're dozing. Is that the consciousness you're talking about? Is that consciousness first?
That would be how you would practice it. Yeah, that would be the path quality of it. And so the ground is difficulty or confusion, or what the hell should we do with this, or why am I suffering, or just confusion, or just the basic teaching of the Buddha, life is suffering. Then the path is practicing to train the awareness to reshuffle the deck, or work with the awareness so that the conditioning, the enculturation of the things that have been going on, not only in this lifetime, but for centuries, that we retrain that. So this means that we might need to go in and look at the fundamental area, that where the forms actually arise at. Look at that. Look at the root, the radical position on that, and just watch what moves there without accepting it, rejecting it, looking at it. Give it no don't validate that, don't invalidate that, and don't turn away from that. And then, as we go along, then the awareness itself begins to become, to speak about it relatively, it begins to become primary. We're just on receive. There's no receiver. More questions are good.
When you're bowing, so when we're on receive, does that include naming? So just as you were saying, we're sitting looking at the wall, we see a wall. Do we say wall? Is that also
so the practice would be to do as little as possible as far as adding or naming or math or numbers or any, to do as little as possible in that area. But then the fruition aspect of that, for lack of a better name or indicator or dynamic, the fruition of that would be everything is there's no difference between what is arising in the space and the space itself. But it needs to start with some kind of just like you sometimes hear people say that at some point the boundary between meditation and post-meditation vanishes. So I've even said that, and it does. But also the objects in the space and the separation between the space and the objects, that goes away, and all you see is this. You just see this. So there's no other word for it other than, to use language, you would have to say this, because there's no longer this and that. More?
Not right now, thank you.
Questions along the lines of what Unyo was asking about? If you have to have your microphone turned on. Michael Schultz, are you trying to talk? Your microphone's not on? Or Michael Stoltz, rather? Can't hear. So I can continue to speak. So the idea is that...
Oh, the volume problem is on our end. Do you have your...
Seems to be on. Yes, it was on our end. Go ahead and speak again, Michael. Yes, I hear you now.
Michael Bowden. Okay. My question has to do with observing and learning. And is there a point when we drop the observing? How can you learn without observing? I guess my question is.
Well, it's just a different kind of learning. Like I say in the book studies, people might come to me and occasionally in an interview say, I just don't understand this. This is just very confusing. And I said, I don't care if you understand. I don't understand it either. I'm not a scholar, but it's important to study it. And studying it means that if you're studying and you're studying the way I'm talking about, you're on receive. And if you think that you need to back out of there because you're not getting it, this is a really highly refined form of self-centeredness or egotism. And if you don't understand, you should ask more questions, because usually that kind of narcissism is very much hidden from the person who thinks, well, I just don't understand that, so I'll go the other way. So, but if I don't have permission from that person, if they just say that and they don't give me permission, I can't say anything about it because I'm interfering with the very thing what they need to see. This is not about collecting information. If you want that, go study chemistry, or go study Buddhism, where you're gathering information and you can talk about all the different schools of Buddhism and remember this person, this school, and that school, and have a lot of things memorized. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. Maybe some people, maybe they should do that. We certainly do a lot of it. I just counted the number of books on my book list, and I think there's over 50 on there. You want to study? Study what the books I point to. But it's not about learning. There's no tests. I would never think of ruining anyone's progress on the spiritual path by testing them, even though they did it in Shambhala. I thought it was ridiculous at the time, but I also gave them the benefit of the doubt and thought, what the hell do I know? Maybe this is what we should be doing. If you don't understand about that, the difference between learning in terms of language or skill or material, working with phenomena, working with things, the ontological status of things, which is just means stuff. So there's going to be some of that, sure. You learn the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 12 Links, and then you go on, and then maybe you need to have a lot more conceptual underlayment to your awareness practice. Everyone seems to be a little different in that area, and I appreciate that. So, but it's not about.
Michael,
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Michael.
It's not that I don't understand. My belief is that I do understand.
Yeah, same problem. Same problem. I just said to all of you, I said, I don't understand. That doesn't mean I don't understand some of it, but I don't understand it in the way, say, somebody who has a really good handle on working with concepts and working with. So I don't really. It doesn't really show up that way. So I have some understanding, but sometimes we tend to overdo that. If we find out we're really pretty smart, then we can get ahead of the game and nail it. So my volume was turned up. If anybody wants to ask another question, go ahead.
Chisho has a question.
Chisho, oh my gosh, Chisho's on here somewhere. Where is he?
On YouTube.
If I'd known he was on here, I would have changed the way I said that.
I think he's up here on YouTube.
I don't see him. Go ahead. What's Chisho's question?
He asks, will we ever know if we are just receiving?
I think so. I think it could be different with different people, but you know the way you know it is you don't know what's coming your way. You know its name. Sure, you know it's a red-winged blackbird. It's if you're in the South China Sea, it'd be maybe a whale. You'd know that. You'd know what that was. But that's the end of the elaboration. It doesn't belong to anybody. It doesn't have any qualities that you add on. You receive the qualities that are there. It's blue. It's covered with water, or it's has red wings and it's flying through the air right above your head. A very, very simple perception. And if there's a very simple perception, then the ideation that pops up as I'm perceiving that gets no fuel at all. So it's just a perception. Doesn't mean there isn't an organism here and an organism there that are sharing roughly the same thing we call space. It just means that they're not separate. And if we see that, then there isn't anything else to understand. Yes.
When you're bowing. So just to continue on
Certainly.
the same vein with Chisho. So if we are just receiving, you mentioned red-winged blackbird, a whale, you see the qualities. So what if we have a preconception, especially in light of the racial unrest that has been prominent?
Yes.
Is there a way to intercept the reception and reframe it if we have a certain prejudice towards? a nationality or something.
It's only, as far as I can tell, it's only about receiving. Just receive it. There may be some production there, but it won't be very much. At some point, it might be a great deal. But initially, the practice part is just receive, rather than do something. As Dogen said it another way, if you go out towards the world, this is delusion. When the world comes to you, this is awakening. My way of saying it is just receive, don't produce. But if you do produce, then just observe what you're producing. In other words, rather than validate it, I'm doing this because of this and because of that. We just get tied up in terrible knots called relative truth that looks like there's such a thing as right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, life and death. That's the big one. We actually think we're living beings. And I'm not saying we're not, but I'm saying look deeper. Nobody has told me this. I mean, you can read it. It's all over the Advaita teachings and the Buddhist teachings and the Upanishads. It's all over the place. Not to. But if you see it, you don't care what anyone else is saying about it particularly. More about that?
Not at the moment. Okay.
So what would come instead of what comes and then you add on, which then you'd also have as a practice, you'd have to receive that also. What comes is just what comes. Whatever is showing up is what you see and what you receive. So there's no division between, I don't like this part, but I'll take this. I'll take some of that, but I don't want that that's coming over there. And who cares about that other thing? Passion, aggression, and ignorance.
Maria bowing.
Yes.
What is that which we receive? Bowing.
What is that which we receive?
Yes.
So relatively, it's just whatever's moving. Relatively, that's the practice part. That's the path. The ground is suffering. The path is, let's look at the suffering, rather than come up with ideas about how to cover it up or how to get away from it or medicate, or for that matter, meditate ourselves away from it. Let's look at it. Let's see what it is fundamentally. So that can show up as all kinds of things depending on the karma that brought you into this realm in the first place and caused you to trip over this particular tree branch called the Buddha's Dharma. And here you are practicing this. You're still at that same spot on the ground where you fell, practicing the Dharma. And then eventually, through the act of receiving and giving everything your attention, eventually you start to receive or see what this fundamentally is, and it is not separate. So all you see is yourself. As long as you might still be embodied for another 50 years, or 50 minutes, or 20 minutes, or 20 years, but you no longer see anything else. The teaching in the third training teachings is called empty of other. And it's not like there isn't other people. Yeah, you talk to them all the time. You're always going to meet people where they're at. And if they think they're real, and they think their thoughts are real, and they think their emotions are real, you're going to argue with them. It wouldn't help to actually say, you're full of shit. You're believing your thoughts. Now, if somebody's a really close student of mine, they might get too close. Now, let them have it. Or not. Perhaps not. So whatever starts to come your way eventually, I say eventually because it's still, as long as there's a path quality of receiving whatever scenery is coming towards you as you're walking down the path. Just a way of talking about it. Whatever scenery is showing up, just receive. Add nothing. Even if you know the name of a bird, don't add. Unless the name comes up spontaneously, then of course you wouldn't want to fight with anything that's arising, because the bird and what is arising in your mind are the same thing. If you're not interfering with them, start to interfere, and then all of a sudden, heaven and earth are set apart, a hair's breadth deviation, and you've totally missed the whole damn thing, because you're still into somebody who's on a path, who's looking at a bird. It's a particular bird, not that bird, but that bird over there. And I think I can't quite remember that bird's name, but as soon as I talk to Ondo, I'm going to find out what that bird's name is. Have any other birders here besides Ondo? So you know what I'm saying. I think it's like whatever's coming is going to be just what it is, and it'll look separate, it'll look different, and it'll be challenging. And the ego mind keeps looking at it, and the ego mind will keep rearing its head and saying, come on, this is not working. You're not doing any better. You're still full of yourself. You're still self-centered. You're still having suffering. Maybe you should study yoga, or maybe you should, you know what I'm saying? Those kind of things keep showing up. Maybe I should do something else, or maybe I should sit more. Maybe I should sit less. Maybe I should get a special practice. And it's not that there couldn't be some of those things might not be helpful on your path. That's why you have a teacher, a teaching, and a community. Because between the three of those, I don't say you're cornered, but you're trapped. Not too bad of a trap.
Michael Bowen, what do you mean by using the word real? Something's real.
Yeah, it's real because it's not subject to change. It's not relative to anything. It's fundamentally real. It's real. It's real. Everything else is coming and going. Name me one thing that's not coming and going, and I'll let me see if I would give that the moniker of being real. Can you do it? Something that never changes. Yeah, hard to find something, because the more you find something close to that, it's more and more like nothing. The sky is full of mosquitoes. Still something. These mosquitoes, what are they doing? They're dividing up the sky. Right, Ondo? So let me have some questions from some of you fully ordained monks there. Or if you're sewing a robe, ask me a question.
When you were talking to Maria, responding to her question,
Yes.
I think you brought up meeting people where they're at, if they're believing their thoughts, and so on. What or who is believing or disbelieving thoughts?
The consciousness is turning itself into a wad of something, turning itself. Consciousness is powerful. Consciousness makes turtles. You know how hard it'd be to make a turtle? Consciousness does that. And you're not separate from the consciousness that makes turtles, or ducks, or aphorisms. It's not separate from that. It's also not the same as that. That's why it's a conundrum. So that grasping, that rejecting, and that shutting down, that dynamic, we use the seventh consciousness and those kind of models to help us have some kind of access to that particular dynamic of the consciousness of the awareness that tends to bundle up into a protective area or a paranoid area. Trungpa Rinpoche called the seventh consciousness a paranoid insurance policy. It's like, I'm going to just wad myself up here, and I'm just going to be here, and if any threat comes along, I'm going to stop it or change it or move away from it. And you can make up all kinds of stories about that. Consciousness is not something else. There isn't anything else. I'm not trying to be vague or bizarre or zen-y or anything. Come and get me. Ask me questions, especially you people that are ordained. Ask on behalf of others. If you think you know everything, which means you don't have any questions, right? Is that right? I already know everything. Come and get me. Yes.
Sokuzan,
Go ahead.
Can stillness be seen?
I think if I understand your question, I think that just through contrast, through something moving and something else isn't not moving, but it's very relative. So from one point of view, everything is still, and from another point of view, everything is moving. So it's the relative idea is that, but what is meant by stillness is a more of an ultimate idea that nothing really is occurring because of the ultimacy. But it's not something you can kind of grok with your sixth sense feels. But it's something you could contemplate and reflect on. Reflect on movement as you watch your thoughts move. Reflect on stillness as that area right next to the thought that's moving. Use the contrast idea rather than movement or not movement. The interesting thing about it is the self-centered aspect of the mind starts to feel more and more at a loss for this. This is why it seems to be necessary to have this kind of a structure. Otherwise, you just give up after a while. I know if you give up and stop, that you just feel worn out, like you're not getting anywhere. And then some people, depending on how they're wired, will just start to think to themselves, like, I guess, maybe I already am enlightened. Every now and then you meet somebody who thinks they're enlightened and they don't hesitate. Well, they might hesitate a little bit because they don't want to look too bad. Might hesitate a little bit. They might hem and haw. Well, I'm not really enlightened. Or yeah, well, no, I'm not enlightened. You know what I mean? So you might see stillness and you might see movement. You might see the contrast and you might be very perplexed by the whole thing because of the seduction of that kind of those kind of concepts to cause you to look for something moving or look for something that is staying still, which is, highly polished form of materialism. More is good, less is good. Are you monks trying to crank up questions or not?
I have a question I've been waiting to ask.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, then I'm bowing. Earlier you said the concept of consciousness. So whatever that is, can that be directed?
No. I use the word awareness. You can direct it. I'm looking at you, but now I'm going to be aware of the door. So, but I could also listen to the door, which might be a little bit more difficult to understand, or could smell the door, or I could think the door. I mean, it sounds a little crazy or confusing, but there's a lot can happen in that area. A lot can be understood with approaching that as not to lock down too tight on a particular way of understanding or receiving or directing one's awareness or consciousness. What this talk is about is just reflecting on how important just consciousness is. It doesn't have to be a person there. And so just the totally valuable thing about you being here and being alive is you're here. And then we end up coming with all kinds of protocols about how to get somewhere else, how to be better, how to be more wealthy, better looking, better, all of that. We all deal with this. And so this is why it seems to be so important to find a construct, find the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha and work within that construct and try to help others. Work on your own mind also, but help others too and support others. Becomes quite.
So that question was inspired by a verse in the 30 verses.
Okay, go ahead.
And one translation is, if consciousness isn't situated in this only, the twofold grasping will not cease to operate.
Yes.
So if consciousness isn't situated with this in this only,
that's a great one, isn't it?
How would we?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
I just was saying, isn't that a great line? Go ahead with your question. I apologize for interrupting you. Go ahead.
So it says if consciousness
At the wall. Gaze, sit down, hold still, look at the wall. Just this, just this, just this. And it'll be just this, just that, on and on and on, chatter, daydreaming. I'm sure you all of you, especially those of you who've done block sitting, where there's long periods of sitting, boring, looking for entertainment, looking for what? Something else, looking for something else. How do I know about it? You know how I know. I've done that. I still do that. I still get bored. I'm bored now. So if consciousness isn't just in this, if it's not here, if it's not situated there, just a way of talking about it. I don't know, Chisho, what was the word for situated in Sanskrit? You know, you remember?
I mean, there are several words. Prasthana would be one of my words.
Prasthana.
Let me go look at that verse and then I'll come back.
Excellent.
I don't know, but
Thank you. Please do.
Which verse is that?
It's which number is the verse? Go on. You know,
I think it's either 25 or 26. Not positive. That one.
okay. And so,
Keshavai 6. Yavat vijnati matratve vijnanam na avatishtati. Yeah, avatishtati is established in.
okay.
Avatishtati. Tishtati is to stand.
Okay, so
Avatishtati is to establish.
okay, so it is very similar to situated.
Yeah, I would have translated it as established.
Established. Okay, and so Stefan Anaker's translation you're talking about though is the one where he said situated.
That's what Sokuzan is talking about.
Yeah. Okay. And what word did
I have not referred to.
what word did the other translation you guys are looking at? What word did they use there?
I don't know.
Didn't know there was going to be a test.
This is a test.
So, Kishibai, Ben Connolly uses does not rest.
Huh. Yeah.
Just rest in projection only.
Huh. Yeah.
That's what Ben Connolly uses. But I don't
Okay.
know Stefan
Yeah.
Aneker's. I mean, Sokuzan knows it by heart, and so does Sokuzan. So.
Yeah. Okay, so well, we can leave it at that. But thank you for looking that up, Chisho. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have to use words to talk about this or point at this. I'm using words all the time, and I'm always trying to understand what might be a better way to talk about something. And they say situated in, or established in, or rest in, and so there's all kinds of saying. It's not about grasping it; it's just about understanding it and perceiving it, and not accepting it, not rejecting it, not looking away. To me, that's resting. So don't buy it. Don't try to situate. And that's why these conceptual things are so difficult, because it sounds like they're telling you to do something that is an active doing, rather than may look more like just not doing anything, but stay with the consciousness only. This is why I'm saying consciousness first. What arises in consciousness? I don't care which one of these concepts it is, or which one of these translations is. If you attach to any one of those, then that's just like it's like a consciousness sink. A sink. I mean, it's like the energy of consciousness gets absorbed in the selectivity of the word or the intention, or just like shikantaza. Sometimes we use really words it's really hard to understand, like shunyata or suchness. So that it's much more difficult to go in with the ego mind and just do that. And do that or be that. So they're magnetic, and then they pull us into it. But as soon as we get into the word suchness, how often do you use that word? Like the only time I've ever used it, specifically would be such and such. So suchness. Just tatata or the Tathagata Garbo, the womb of one or that which comes thusly, or just as there, without any particular production or nothing producing it, and so on. So difficult to do conceptually. This is why it seems necessary. It is necessary, as I understand it, to just train the mind to see clearly what is coming, what is going, and what is hanging out. Goes on more.
Goes on. Bowing. A couple of years ago, when we were looking at that verse together, you suggested using the word attention, and you said, so as long as attention isn't situated in this only. So what is attention?
just attending to something. So that may work. A person might have to study this material and maybe not translate it themselves, but just like with you and Chisho, you're talking back and forth, and Chisho appreciates the what is the other fellow's I can't Jay is it Garfield?
Goes on bowing. We're studying the three natures.
Three Natures, and that's Garfield's translation. Okay, that's right. I get those mixed up. So you might find that just like the Wu Tai translation of the 30 verses, it might be good to have that along, but really it seems that the Anaker translation of the 30 verses seems more crisp or tighter, and a less chance of you sliding off into some kind of a soft approach. When I say soft, I don't mean soft or weak. I'm just seeing a little bit too not specific enough for what is being pointed out and taught. It needs to be more specific, I feel. So any words, we can go backwards on this. Go ahead, Chodo.
If consciousness isn't situated in this only, where is it situated?
Well, it is usually as the confusion or the delusion part of it, it keeps jumping from one to the other, looking for results. We're trying to squeeze happiness out of this situation or that. Should I do this? Should I do that? Consciousness is wandering around at the service of an imputed identity called the seventh consciousness, or me and my likes and dislikes and my hopes and fears. And so what's being suggested or recommended through these teachings is to look at whatever is moving and then just continually receive that, so that consciousness is receiving that instead of fighting with it or changing it or adding a bunch of bologna sandwiches to it. Just receive. Just receive. There's no guarantee that you'll attain liberation, but you're probably not going to attain liberation by going in circles looking for one thing after another, trying on different spiritual paths or shoes. So just sit down, keep it very simple. Look at what moves. Watch what moves. Watch on the wall. Watch in your mind. Hold the body very still. Set up a strong contrast of the stillness of the body, so you can see the movement of the consciousness, and liberate yourself from the cage of your afflictions.
When you're bowing.
Yes.
So a minute ago, I think you said stay with consciousness only. But you also said it's not about grasping, not buying it. So I guess I'm having a challenge with that word stay. Because you talk about maintenance, and we can't maintain anything.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the staying with consciousness?
Okay. So the way I would use that in the way you're asking, just like when you sit down and face the wall, you stay there. So that kind of, once you do, just stay there. And of course, keeping your body in one position is difficult, but you also notice the way you can't quite do that, the way you need to get up and go to the restroom, or you need to stand up and stretch, or you need to stretch your leg out. So the intention is not a restriction so much, or an order, or a military kind of thing, or a war. I mean, there's no struggle happening there. You just do the best you can to hold still and observe. But there's some wiggle room there, so you can get up. The same thing with stay with, insofar as you can. And I say this, I think I did in the talk today, that insofar as you can, just receive. And if you notice yourself out of causes and conditions, let's call it your karma, you tend to add on to certain thoughts that arise. Then just observe that. The very thing that you're producing, you can turn into reception, especially if you don't add on to that necessarily, I shouldn't be producing. If the producing comes up spontaneously, keep it very simple and just notice that you're doing that. More?
So does appreciation come into this?
Eventually, appreciation, the way I talk about appreciation is allowing things to be what they are and seeing what they are. And seeing what they are doesn't mean you know what they are in the conventional sense, of good or bad or up or down or back or forth or black or white, pink or yellow, or anything. You don't know anything. You don't necessarily know the qualities of it. You just know its basic presence.
Is appreciation producing?
It may, but it would come out of dependent origination, and there would be no producer behind it. So it could happen. Like you would be appreciating something, and then because of the appreciation, again, dependent origination, you might move closer to whatever it is. You might move away. You might leave. You might talk about it to someone. It might be just very ordinary, but it will be coming out of what you're seeing. It's like when people go into an art gallery. I'm using that because I could be using anything: poetry, music, any of the artistic productions, including food situations, anywhere people creating anything. To appreciate that isn't to know who did it or know what school it was, or that's just a substitute. I mean, you could know that too, but it's appreciate is to really see it, receive it in such a way that you don't know what it is. You don't stop what you're appreciating by adding, well, it's abstract expression and abstract expressionism, or it's a metal music, or it's a folk music, or any kind of. Not that you couldn't do that also, but that wouldn't replace your receiving. You could receive it and still have names and forms could arise around it, and you could still appreciate. That doesn't mean you appreciate it like the conventional idea of art appreciation. It's different than that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric Wilson has a question.
Eric Wilson has a question. Go ahead.
As soon as I can find it. He asks, does one who comes thusly have any motivation?
From the point of view that you're asking it, I would say no. But the point of view that one who is coming thusly, that could function in lots of different ways. It could function as a bodhisattva, or it could function as a waiter in a restaurant. Other than umami, so don't get all cocky over there, Ishikai. For a while, I thought Nishikai was smiling, and then I realized his screen's frozen. And then I thought, no, it can't be frozen because that beautiful person next to him is not frozen. You guys like little postage stamps. Further questions? If you have them, or we can close if you have further questions. Don't you? Go ahead, whomever.
Earlier you said be aware of being aware. Yeah. What does awareness look like?
There's not much happening there. One of the ways to do it is there's a teaching that I talk about now and then. It's called halfway measures. And that might be a good way because it doesn't include particular phenomena like thoughts or emotions or anything. Mantras, passion, aggression, ignorance, but just any 2 points between here and the garage or here in the parking lot. At some point, just you could physically stop, but you could also just flash on just the awareness, just a basic presence of being alive and being here and receiving. Not any particular thing, but just notice that everything is coming into all of your mind stream through all of the 6 sense fields, including the mind. This is happening spontaneously all the time. And at some point, if you continue on this path, there's a good chance that there won't be anything but halfway measures. You're always halfway between here and nowhere. And it's not uncomfortable. Life is no longer uncomfortable. I'm not saying you don't have pain. You're definitely going to have pain. You have nerve endings, but you're no longer looking for something else. Those days are gone. And you didn't do it.
teacher boy.
Yes, sir.
So on the halfway measure, I do practice it, especially by doing crossword. I know the word and I'm going to enter it, but I stop halfway before starting to write on the paper. What am I observing? I mean, it feels different. I now know what that feeling is different in terms of, instead of just writing.
It sounds like a good practice.
I don't know what I'm looking,
You know
what
enough.
I'm looking for, or what.
You aren't. You aren't looking for anything. No, you're doing it. I can tell by the way you describe it. Just continue. Just continue to do that, if you wish. No, there's no need of adjusting you at all. I'm looking at everybody's faces, but when I look at Nicole and Nishikai, it looks like they're watching cartoons. They're both laughing. So I think they're actually watching cartoons and pretending they're attending a Dharma talk. No? Oh, he's doing it? He's the cartoon.
If you want to look closer, everyone, you can pin their video. It brings that up like full screen. If you want to get a good look.
Well, the only person I've been doing that with is Wendy, because I was trying to figure out what neighborhood she's in there. See that? Wendy's, what are you doing there, Wendy? I can't do it. It won't work with the photograph. Any questions just before the final question?
I'm bowing. What appears to precede consciousness?
Very good. Excellent. Yeah, that's the absolute. It's just, since you can ask that question, then I can give you that kind of an answer. That's nothing in particular, but that's what you're not separate from. If you realize that, then the work is over. The only way you'll really notice that might be the case is you notice you don't have anything to do. You don't want anything. You're not really too concerned with what happens. Unless you're hungry, then you might eat. And it's not some kind of fancy a feeling of being some kind of transcendental know-it-all. It may be even the opposite of that. It's like Kobin said, falling apart, falling apart, falling apart. Nothing to do. Everything all at once. Time and space are gone. They're still there as an illusion, but they're fundamentally have no gravitas anymore. There isn't anyone else. The only way you can be lonely if there's someone else and you don't get to see them. But if there isn't anyone else, good question. There's a lot of room for questions in that area. I would be delighted if you would take us all down in there, and I'll bring my flashlight.
I think you said it's the absolute, and you also said it's nothing. Is the absolute nothing?
No.
What is the absolute?
You're looking at it, but you just laminate things on top of it. You think a wall is different than a chicken just because one clucks. You're looking at it. It's not two. When we say not two, nothing is left out. Nothing gets to escape and be the one other thing that is not two, like the wall or the absolute or the whatever. You can come up with all kinds of, but there's nothing else. The elseness is it even says this on Unyo's Raksu, what, 10 years ago? Was it 10? No, 10 years ago, I gave her Jukai and wrote nothing else on there. And at the time, I didn't know what I was writing. I just wrote nothing else. And then I'm stuck with reading it too. Senchu, don't you have any questions?
Since you bowing, I don't. But I wish I did. Bowing.
Okay, well, as I've said many times, or at least 10 times, I don't really want you to crank questions up. On the other hand, cranking them up is not good. On the other hand, if during the week or something you come up with a question about anything that's going on, any of the teachings or anything you see or understand, jot it down, because there's only so much time left for all of us, not just me, but only so much time. But what is that?
People. Others.
But Unya's trying to get me to look at YouTube because she thinks I'm spending too much time with you guys. And so she thinks they're going to be jealous. Is that what you think?
The fear left out.
Hmm?
The fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out.
FOMO.
FOMO. That's right.
Oh, here's a question. Oh, wonderful. Joseph from Kalamazoo, bowing.
Yes, sir.
Is the laminate part of the absolute?
Laminate?
You just said we laminate. You told Sokuzan that he's looking at it. We just
Yeah,
laminate.
it is. Yeah, I got it. Okay.
So is the laminate
Yes.
part of the absolute?
It is, if you see it. But if you don't see it, then you will think that you're missing out. FOMO.
And then Eric Wilson has another question. You say you're looking at it. Could you say you're looking with it? Is it looking with you?
Maybe a little bit. But I think the teaching or the instruction that you're looking at it would be more helpful than looking with it. Because that's like there's a bunch of stuff you're teaming up with reality and going to attain enlightenment together. So I think looking at it is better. It's more mirror-like. There seems to be a mirror-like quality. And this shows up in the teachings, not way before we got here. The Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi out of the 8th century. And the mirror-like wisdom. So very much like looking in a mirror and recognizing this. That would be a way that I could say that this has been going on with me for quite a while. We could call it going on. I'm not thinking about it all the time or reflecting, but if I just look at anything and with a kind of inquisitive about what is that, if I ask anything what it is, it tells me. And it doesn't say table. It doesn't say pile of garbage. There's a pile of garbage over there. There's not garbage over there. Very clean over there. It doesn't come back and say its name. It's what it is, and you're not separate from it. So therefore, it has a mirror-like quality. It doesn't look like you, but the consciousness that is perceiving that is also perceiving itself. And this is where the actual perception of the six sense fields and their objects starts to show up in such a way that you're actually experiencing the relative nature of absolute truth. The relative nature. You're an incarnated being. You're not even a human being. You're just, because you could be any being. You could be a turtle we talked about earlier. And I'm not kidding you. And also, I have no proof, and I don't need proof, nor do you. You just reflect on that a little bit. There isn't anything that couldn't happen next. Anything is possible. Questions are good. You have any more? Come on, you guys. There's some things I would like to say, but I can't say it unless you ask me the question. Because yes, Kuhn.
Does consciousness have a kind of language, Bowing?
I'm not sure if I understand what you're saying, but everything is, the language we use is very primitive, of sounds and verbalization and so on, making up things to represent something else. Wood, Okotsu. But if I'm understanding what you're asking, I would that might be what you're asking. I would say that if you're just aware and think everything is coming at you in terms of it's what the names, the color of something. Something's green, something's red, something's blue, something's square, something already has such a strong identity to it, like a bookshelf or a wall, or that. But if you can look at it just as it is without buying into the way it's used and the materialistic aspect of it, then the language of that is it's just not separate. It's been said long. One of the first teachings of the Buddha that I heard, this is way a long time ago, probably in maybe the early 60s sometime. I don't know what I was reading it. I think one of Kanzi's translations of one of his texts, Heart Sutra, Diamond Sutra, or maybe a commentary, is that everything is preaching the Dharma. And that caught me at that time. I remember thinking, how can it possibly be everything's preaching the Dharma? Well, what is the Dharma? Dependent origination, not separate, no self in the skandhas, no solid being anywhere. Just presence, just authentic presence, and it's there. It's not yelling at you. It's not whispering at you, but it's preaching or it's teaching you. You're ready to receive it. And how do you practice? Sit down, look at a wall, or look at a tree, or look at the back of a turtle. Speaking of turtles, just look at something that's not moving. Turtles don't move much. Look at something that's not moving. And then watch what continues to move, which is your mind chattering about this, liking this, don't like this, I like this, I'm not doing so good, I'm doing terrible, I'm doing really great. Any kind of movement that's happening in the mind, all you have to do is watch it. There's nothing to accomplish. If you're just observing what's moving, this is the path. It's like nothing is moving, yet the scenery is going by. And what are you doing? Look at your feet. Is there a path there?
Sheldon has a question.
Sheldon. Thank you for joining us, Sheldon.
He asks, as long as we are a sentient being who perceives, won't we be laminating our perception onto what is real?
Yes. That's a good question. But here's the thing. You don't have to stop doing it. You just have to see that you do it. If you're just aware, that's why I say, it's not about getting somewhere. It's not about getting enlightened. It's not about suddenly transcending this or that or being someone else or suddenly having no more negative feelings or being all peaceful. It is about fundamentally seeing what is happening. And don't accept it, don't reject it, don't look away. And in this way, the consciousness that was just showing up as somebody you thought was trapped in your head, there isn't anywhere you don't see yourself. There isn't anywhere that consciousness. You can move your awareness anywhere. And there's no proof, there's no evidence for it, but you don't need evidence. The evidence is the relative situation. Evidence that fire burns, water's wet, earth is hard, wind moves. Evidence.
Tanya from Kalamazoo has a question. Tanya bowing. What is justice?
Well, in the conventional sense, I don't know. I don't have a dictionary definition of it, but I would say that's one of the things that's kind of missing in our world is justice. So it's just a relative way of saying that we should be fair. We should try to consider people and be just. Look at a situation where this has happened, the person did this happened, and that happened due to their karma, their causes and conditions. All the conditioning brings up all these billions of people all having different ideas about what this world is about. Everything from their religion to their non-religion to their atheism, agnosticism, Buddhism, Sufism, Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, you could go on to everything. So there's all kinds of different things going on. So justice would be just being fair with someone about whatever situation, to try to look at it instead of just a cut and dried thing where somebody does this, we lock them up. That's not justice. That's brutality. And you can't correct it you can't correct the fire as it's burning the house. You have to find out about matches, find out about fire, find out about the wood, the temperature at which wood burns, a lot of things. Not to be too silly about it, but you have to go deep into it. And what I say is, why not go deep into the whole damn thing? Why not find out what this human being is? This is an astonishing thing to show up, whatever mine is 79 years ago. Yours is 25, 30, 40 years ago, or whatever age you may be. We just kind of just go along. Well, I'm this, and I went to this school, and I had these friends, and I had this wife or this spouse, and then I got divorced, or I didn't get divorced, or I didn't get married, or all these stories about ourselves. And it's not that you need to get rid of them, just see that they're untrue. They're relatively true and ultimately untrue. You can do that. You can see that. If you want that, I'll help you with it, as I say over and over again. I want to make sure you hear me say that. That's what I'm here for. I'm not here to be admired or adored or anything, or believed in, as I say over and over. Don't believe it. Don't believe what I say. But listen, pay attention, consider it.
No more questions.
No more questions here in the peanut gallery.
We could dedicate the merit at the temple.
Dedicate the merit at the temple, and you guys can go home and rest. My goodness. Nishikai and Nicole are telling each other jokes.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokochi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.
Prenez rendezvous.